The storm had barely settled over the mountains when he arrived, soaked, shivering, and looking nothing like the man he once dreamed he'd become. They called him Hell Angel in his old biker days, a name earned from dust, danger, and the reckless fire in his eyes. But now, as Lucas Hale stepped out of the beat-up pickup and looked at the lonely cabin his father left behind, he felt more like a broken ghost than a legend. The wind slapped against the wooden walls, the forest crackled with cold, and somewhere beneath it all, the silence pressed on his chest like a weight he wasn't sure he could survive. And then, through the greyness, the only thing his father left besides the cabin limped toward him. A half-blind aging dog with a greying snout and a slow wag of the tail, as if greeting not a man but a memory. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Lucas had spent years running from everything that hurt. His father, his past, the mistakes he'd buried under bruised knuckles, and the roar of motorcycle engines. Coming back was never part of the plan. But after a crash that shattered more than bones, after the club that once felt like family turned into a reminder of everything he'd lost, the cabin was the only thing left in his name. And the old dog, Rusty, was the only heart willing to greet him without judgment. Lucas crouched in the mud, letting the dog rest its head in his hands, feeling warmth for the first time in months. It scared him more than the cold. Inside, the cabin smelled like pine, dust, and memories Lucas didn't want to face. His father had been a quiet man, the kind who didn't say much but loved deeply in the ways he knew. Lucas had pushed him away, choosing the fast life over the quiet woods. Now the silence was almost too loud. The cabin held his father's tools, old photographs, a half-finished wooden carving on the table. Everything felt frozen in time, as if his father had stepped out just moments before he died. Lucas dropped onto the creaking couch, Rusty curling beside him, and for a long time he just let the emptiness swallow him. The days passed slowly, marked only by the sound of the wind and the soft padding of Rusty's steps. Lucas tried to keep himself busy, splitting wood, repairing leaks, cleaning rooms he hadn't slept in since childhood. But grief had a way of filling every corner, no matter how hard he worked. Each night memories clawed back, the last fight he had with his father, the phone calls he'd ignored, the years gone without a word. Guilt wrapped itself around his ribs like iron. He wondered if he deserved this cabin, or this dog, or even a chance to start over. It was Rusty who changed everything. One morning the dog refused to come inside, pawing and whining at the far edge of the yard. Lucas, frustrated and exhausted, followed him into the woods. Rusty stopped near an old half-collapsed shed, one Lucas hadn't stepped into since he was a kid, and began clawing feverishly at the dirt. Lucas tried to pull him back, worried the old dog would hurt himself, but Rusty growled in a way Lucas had never heard before, deep and urgent, so Lucas dug too. The ground was hard, thick with roots and old memories, but a few inches down, Lucas's hand struck something solid, a metal edge, then wood, a box, heavy, locked. His breath caught as he lifted it free, the weight strange and ominous in his hands. It wasn't the kind of thing a man buries casually. With Rusty watching, tail stiff with anticipation, Lucas carried the box inside and pried it open. It wasn't tools, or keepsakes, or letters. It was money, stacks of it, bundles wrapped tight, aged but intact. He counted twice, hands trembling harder each time. $3 million, hidden by a man who never once acted like he owned more than a few dollars to his name. Lucas sat back, the world spinning. Why would his father hide something like this? Why hadn't he used it? Why leave it to a son who'd barely been around long enough to say goodbye? The questions tore at him, reopening wounds he'd tried to bury under the life he'd chosen. But alongside the guilt came something else, a realization that maybe his father had been waiting. Maybe he'd known Lucas wasn't ready back then. Maybe he wanted his son to find the treasure only when he needed it, not when he would have wasted it. Lucas spent that night awake, Rusty's head resting on his knee as the fire crackled low. He thought about the crash, the friends who weren't really friends, the man he'd become. And he thought about his father, quiet, steady, working long days and coming home to this cabin, alone but never bitter. Lucas felt tears burn behind his eyes, unexpected and fierce. His father had left him more than money. He'd left a chance. Over the next weeks, things slowly changed. Lucas used part of the money to renovate the cabin, fixing the porch, strengthening the roof, replacing the broken windows to let the light in. He paid off debts he'd accumulated in the darkest parts of his life. He visited the town he'd avoided for so long, helping the local mechanic who remembered him as the wild kid from the woods. He donated quietly to the animal shelter where Rusty had been adopted years ago. Every day, little by little, he felt something repairing inside him. Not healed, not yet, but mending. Rusty grew weaker as time passed. His steps slowed, his breaths became softer, and one cold morning, Lucas woke to find the old dog lying peacefully beside the wood stove, eyes closed as if dreaming. Lucas sat beside him, tears falling silently onto Rusty's fur. The dog who had been his father's last companion had given Lucas the last gift either of them could ever give, a reason to stay, to rise, to change. When Lucas buried Rusty under the tall pine overlooking the cabin, he whispered gratitude into the cold air. Gratitude for the dog who dug up more than money. Gratitude for a father he was finally beginning to understand. Gratitude for a second chance he never thought he'd deserve. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment and subscribe. Your support means more than you know. Before we end, take a moment and comment below what would you have done if you discovered something like this in your father's memory. Lucas stayed in the mountains after that, not hiding, not running, just living. He rebuilt not just the cabin, but himself. And sometimes, when the wind moved through the trees, he felt as if Rusty and his father were still there, quiet, steady, watching him finally become the man they'd hoped he could be.